Hi everyone, welcome to Historically Speaking, an online YouTube history channel focused on the history of various institutions and professionals, how history intersects with education and culture in the world around us. I'm Karen Yang, host of Historically Speaking. Today with me is Molly G. Martin, who is the Director of Strategy at New America. From 2017 to 2021, Molly was the director of New America Indianapolis, where she worked with local communities across the Rust Belt on issues of racial and economic equity. Since 1999, more about New America has nurtured a new generation of policy experts and public intellectuals. Today, they're a wonderful community of innovative problem solvers, combining expertise in research, reporting, and analysis with new areas of coding, data science, and human-centered design to innovate nationally and globally. And Molly, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or just any other information?
No, so glad to be here, Karen. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm just gonna jump straight into it. I think New America has a really, really great mission, and obviously, it has also a bit of history with like its 20 plus years, kind of in the American forefront. So, what has been the history of New America, and how has that history, I feel like, guided New America's principles and ideologies, I guess?
Sure. I think to back up just a little further for one moment is just to think about what think tanks are in America. And
Hmm.
that gives you a clue about why we exist. So, think tanks actually during wartime, like World War II, were a reaction to policymakers being in kind of a new world order and not having a private place to chat and re strategize. But into the 60s, they really gravitated to be nonprofit kind of idea factories, places
Yeah.
where experts and academics could get together and talk about social problems. And generally, the role of any think tank is to help people make better decisions. And
Hmm.
those people could be policymakers, and they generally are. That's a real target for most think tanks. But they could also be other public influencers or practitioners. And that's kind of where New America comes in. Like any think tank, we want to help people in the world share their great ideas and also have the research and rigorous practice to make them a reality. What makes us a tiny bit different, you talked about it, is in 1999, the idea was, well, we're heading into a new age, a digital age, where policy is really impacted by the things that
Hmm.
technology brings to us, emerging social media at the time, the internet. I won't say it was new, but I will say that when I was in college in the 90s, it looked a lot different. So we're dealing in this new forefront. And also politically in the country, we're in a really interesting place. We were in a place where it felt very polarized. That may sound familiar to most of your viewers. And
Hmm.
the idea that some of New America's founders had was, what does it mean to be in the radical center? Is there a place in the middle of political dialogue in this country where you could have huge ideas that weren't partisan and could get us to make interesting strides and protect people's rights online and in person and protect their peace and their safety on the war front, in education, in economics, online, and what does it
Hmm.
mean to do that from kind of the middle of the political discourse? So
Hmm.
that's where we started, and our history really kind of made its bones. The organization made its bones by looking at what it means to be in the digital age and what that
Hmm.
does to change policymaking. And
Hmm.
one of our core principles is to make sure that expert voices that aren't always at the table get to
Hmm.
be part of that policymaking, which is a thing
Hmm.
that internet access and technology really brought to us. So those are kind of our roots. And I would say if you want to know who works at a think tank generally, but certainly who works at New America, you have a lot of technologists who work in the public interest, and you or some of your classmates or the people watching might want to go into something like public interest law. Public interest
Hmm.
tech is the name. How do you use tech to help people? We have a lot of former journalists. We have a lot of academics who specialize in practice for education, best practice for international security. We have a lot of attorneys who specialize in international affairs. So it's an interesting melting pot.
Mm, that's really cool. I really enjoy kind of um you kind of adding in some of that idea of like, oh, who works here? Because as someone who's like interested kind of in history, and journalism, I oftentimes I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I don't want to be, like a journalist who's like in the front just like in the front of all of that action, but like this seems like a really great opportunity to also, contribute some of that reporting skill set while also, helping out with all of this really great research. So I really enjoyed hearing about that for sure. I guess like you kind of addressed this a bit, and I really do also enjoy just like hearing you talk about how, we're really kind of at this forefront of technology and just discourse and social media and the internet has really pushed us to have a lot of these different conversations that maybe like 30, 40 years ago we never would have imagined. But what do you think, or what does it mean, I guess, to be a think tank in today's world, and kind of navigate those different opinions online, and also in policy?
What a great question. I mean, a think tank remains a place where if you're trying to get spotlight on the right solutions or the solutions that you think will work best for the most people, and at New America, we care deeply about solutions that impact not just kind of white folks or generally systemically privileged folks. We want to expand that net. So what that means, I think, in the digital age is that you actually have a lot more input to a think tank than ever before. Think tanks were meant to be kind of, in some ways, historically kind of closed door places for smart people to hang out. And that is sometimes, unfortunately, was at the exclusion of people who probably really had great ideas.
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
mentioned being interested in history and journalism, and think tanks are a real intersection of history and journalism. What has the world been, especially in America, where there are a lot of think tanks, and what could it be? And I think the internet age, the digital age, has meant that people out there, quote, people outside of Washington, D.C., I, for example, am based in Indianapolis, have great ideas about what might solve some of the biggest policy problems in today's society, whether that's
Hmm.
access to healthcare, access to affordable, high quality education, access to safety in the face of online violence and the radicalization of some people. We know people out here in the country who are doing it, and the
Hmm.
internet means we know more about it. And the
Hmm.
internet also means that think tanks have to take a greater responsibility to
Hmm.
applying and considering what they're hearing outside of their own walls. So being a
Hmm.
think tank today, I think, means becoming more porous, where ideas
Hmm.
come in and out and not just out.
Hmm. Wait, I really like the idea of being porous and kind of being like a sponge and, filtering kind of, what is good and what is right, I guess, and promoting that sense of equity and equality while also, being kind of on edge or being aware of all of the kind of negative sides of the internet as well with the radicalization and the polarization that is, we see so often online as well. So that's really interesting. And I do think that, yeah, that sounds really, really great in the effort to kind of listen to voices beyond just this one little concentrated mass of people, I guess, and just like doing a lot of really great outreach for sure. I guess I wanted to ask more specifically, like when I first kind of stumbled upon New America or the broad idea of think tanks, I was kind of like, okay, it sounds like there's a lot of really great ideas being generated. I kind of wondered like what are the kind of like projects that, think tanks and more specifically New America undertakes, I guess, or puts out there.
Oh, what a great question. The thing I get asked most about working at a think tank is, ooh, what do you think about? And that's a fair question. So, New America at any given time has about 15 to 20 different programs that focus on different elements, but they really kind of orient around five major themes. You have the
Mhm.
idea of education and work from birth to workforce age. So, just kind of your whole life as a learner and someone who might be out earning money or taking up a certain vocation. Then you have the idea of family economic security and well-being, housing, access to benefits. How do we take care of families with our most vulnerable economic precarity situation? So you have kids 0 to 5 with a high poverty rate in lots of American states. The
Mhm.
group most impacted by poverty are families with children 0 to 5. So we have a group of work that orients around that, as well as gender parity in pay, work-life balance, the idea of caregiving, whether you're giving care to a parent or a child or a partner. So then you move on, you have political reform, especially in America. We have a political reform team, a number of projects that look at how we vote, how we access information, whether or not we can self-organize, whether or not we have adequate opportunities as just voters or people or high school students to chime in on the policies that will affect us. Then we have people and planet-centered global politics, which is a mouthful, but generally what that means is the idea of America's place in the world, but also how democracy has become an interesting challenge in America and beyond, how
Mhm.
countries interact, what that means for national security, what it means for the transmission of ideas, what it means for different countries and cultures to get together to make global policy that could make us all safer or secure, and certainly how technology and the internet impact that front. And then finally, last but not least, we have technology and democracy, which is a host of work that focuses on everything from kind of the digital future, which I don't have to tell someone your age about because you all have grown up in a digital future, but also about what are our rights when we're online? What do companies get to know about us? Who owns our biometric data? And then finally, how do you literally access technology? Do you have affordable broadband? If you live in a rural area, can you get online? Are the prices you're being charged to get online fair? Are you seeing information that's fair, or are you being fed information that might not be entirely true? We
Mhm.
have a lot of interesting work around disinformation that actually spans that bucket and that people and planet-centered global politics. So if all of our work fits into those themes, those are pretty big themes. So what do you do? What we tend to do is we focus on putting out either policy advice, right? We say, if you're going to address this problem in the world, here's what a good policy or a response would include. And here's what you need to think about in terms of race or ethnicity or reach or
Mhm.
sustainability or unintended consequences. We also like to do a lot of programming and kind of advancing of practice. So we found something that works. Let us show you how, and let us show you why, and let us
Mhm.
talk to the people who made this work. And we also do a lot to just kind of keep generating the data and evidence that will let you know how things are going and where there might be a problem. That's part of the art of being a think tank, is watching and saying, someone should be paying attention to that, and it might as well be us. And that's where I'd give you an example of something that New America did to turn an idea into action.
Mhm.
So some years ago, Peter Bergen, who is one of our vice presidents, and his colleagues who look at international work, security policy, they said, do we really know how the CIA uses drones all over the world? Do we know how drones are used, what drone attacks look like? Do we know about extrajudicial killings, killings outside of appropriate process across the world? What if we did? And then we thought, or New America thought, we need a definitive database of those drone strikes. And that will let us have a conversation about whether or not we're aware, whether or not they're being used justly. It was an opportunity for journalists to ask really important questions and kind of pull back the curtain on something that is really important and kind of scary. And so that's how you take an idea and move it to something that actually matters. So now there is this database on drone strikes that actually really drove the conversation about practice and safety and policy. And that's what think tanks do. They look, they worry, and then they try to create something to fix it.
That should be like an official motto, but like maybe worry has like a negative connotation,
Like,
but
look, worry, fix it. I like it. I'll suggest it to my bosses.
just like I feel like that's like such a really, really succinct way to kind of encapsulate what you guys do, which is a lot of really, really awesome and important work. It's kind of like I'm not sure if this is like the correct phrase because I've definitely heard it used in other contexts, but it's kind of like a watchdog in a way, but you're not kind of, criticizing or, doing anything in that idea, I guess, but rather just making sure, people are aware of what they need to be aware of and that, nothing is like sliding by unless we run into a bigger problem into the future, which is really, really awesome. I also really liked, or I don't really like, but I also noted kind of um your quick note about just like how democracy is becoming more of a challenge, I guess, in the United States as well as globally. I think in my CompGov class we like comparative governments. We constantly look at, is the state of democracy around the world kind of pulling back? Are we on that like third wave of democracy or are we receding? Like what does that look like? So I definitely agree that, we are facing a few challenges. And I think like, yeah, think tanks are definitely out there to help us kind of take note of that and try and reverse that as well. Super cool. I wanted to ask, like, do you have a favorite kind of like project, I guess, or focus that you personally really enjoyed working on within New America?
Thanks for asking. So, when I came to New America initially, I had been in philanthropy for about a decade before, grant makers who support social change and projects. And so I came to New America working on something very specific, looking at how the changing nature of work in America might impact people here in the middle of America, where jobs have traditionally looked a little different, maybe manufacturing, maybe agriculture, and with
Mhm.
automation and technology, that can really change the game for rural populations or some places in the middle of the country. But also, I wondered what that changing nature of work, whether it's automation or the ability to work online or different cultures together in the workplace, means for non-white people and
Mhm.
means for women and means for folks who are non-binary in their gender, just people who have not necessarily had systems built for them in America. So that's what I
Mhm.
came in to do. And my work there was basically talking to people, talking to workers, talking to bosses, talking to manufacturers and saying, what do you think your town looks like in 10 years? And what would
Mhm.
you need to do to make sure that your town is lively, that your town is welcoming and safe for
Mhm.
different kinds of people than who lived there 20 years ago?
Mhm.
And then what do you change about the jobs? Is it about creating new jobs? Is it about honoring the fact that people want to be content creators or have an Etsy shop and have kind of what we call craft manufacturing as their job?
Mhm.
I loved that work. Like I stay interested in asking questions about work and economics and
Mhm.
who is left out usually when we make those big plans. And I think part of that comes from growing up in West Virginia. Um, and I grew up in a family of professionals, admittedly. My mom was a nurse, my dad was a visual artist. Many generations of my family had had the privilege of going to college. But I grew up in a place dominated by manual labor, dominated by coal mining, and I wasn't seeing any conversation about what happens next for West Virginia and how you support folks whose jobs and physical bodies have been used for a long time to
Mhm.
make the country run, give it
Mhm.
energy, um, certainly give it chemicals, plastics. And I think that just stuck with me. So that's the work I enjoy most.
That sounds so great. I also really enjoyed how you kind of like dived into your own personal history with that. And that sounds like honestly like an extension of that kind of like journalism idea with, going out, interacting with people and like really just kind of reading the room and making sure that everyone's voices are being heard, which is really awesome. I wanted to kind of close out with one last question, I guess. So I know with all of New America's really, really great values, I wanted to know how can like the general public, I guess, or even students my age support New America's values and kind of continue to think about, the issues that think tanks are worrying about, I guess.
For sure. Well, I'm really glad you asked that. I mean, there are ways I think for anyone to be involved in a think tank, and that sounds like kind of a strange thing to say, but I do believe that it's the responsibility of everyone who lives in this country to advocate for what they care about. And so when I think of ways you can be involved with a place like New America, it's living those values that are important to us. So democracy that represents all Americans, that responds to public concerns, that's creative and fluid and values everyone, whether they were born in America or came to America, and what they see as the policy and political needs. Certainly a country where everyone has access to the education that they need, a place where families and individuals don't have to worry about caring for themselves or others in their families. They grow older. Do they have housing? Do they have childcare? Do they have enough food? That family economic security concept I talked about, all of you can advocate for that in your home state and your community. Certainly a place where you look at technology as a tool, by which you can fully participate in democracy. And you talk about your class and how you're looking at where we are in the kind of life cycle of American democracy. You all are the keepers of the key. I'm 45, so I mean, I'm there, I'm chatting, but I think younger generations, especially Gen Z, frankly, have so much to offer as the standards bearers to say to each other and online and to organize, these are the values we care about, these are the policies we need. And that's the way that technology is supporting the strengthening of democracy. I think the most practical thing, though, that folks can do in terms of technology and democracy is check your sources 2 or 3 times before you share information online. Sharing the right information is very important. And we've learned that in the last few years. And then finally, global competition isn't going away. And the idea that America is not alone in the world is not going away. And what are the values that we all share, and how can that be a productive force? I love seeing people question the idea of, okay, what can we do together? There is an American way. We're all proud to be Americans and live in America. That doesn't mean we think everything America does is great. So hold America accountable, look to models in the rest of the world, travel, meet people outside of your backyard. Those are all ways to kind of be, quote, new Americans. And certainly I hope that folks watching who are interested in the work we do, if you want to read magazine articles that we've written, if you want to read research that we've done, if you have a question, go to newamerica.org, check us out, newsletters, live events that are open to the public. Certainly anyone can also reach out to me if they have an idea. I love getting phone calls from folks who wonder about a problem and wonder if anyone is paying attention.
That's great. That's a perfect segue. I was just gonna say, like, definitely check out everything. And if you have anything you want to send me, I'll link everything down below and make sure, it's out there and on YouTube, I guess. But was there anything else you wanted to add, or I guess like you already kind of shouted out any resources, but any like upcoming events or anything else like that you want me to specifically advertise, I guess?
Well, aren't you kind? Let me think. I'm actually, if you don't mind me being unceremonious, I'm going to pull up our website and see what's cool. But while I'm doing that, Karen, if you have a second, can I ask what made you start your own YouTube channel? I'd love to know.
Yeah, of course. So, um, I was always really interested in history since like seventh grade. I did this like National History Day project kind of thing. And I've always taken a lot of different history classes, but I was kind of like, hey, like taking a step back, I want to kind of interact with the people who are making or documenting, and definitely thinking about history, and kind of like directly interact with them rather than, reading a textbook, although that is great. And kind of get an understanding of what it looks like to be studying the past in order to make changes and make a better future as well. So that's kind of the conversations happening around here, I guess.
I
Yeah.
love that. You're a solutions-oriented journalist. I love that. That's my favorite thing.
Thank you.
I look forward to working for you someday, Karen. One event that I might point folks to, and some of this might sound like a little bit academic, but I think some of your viewers might really enjoy it. We frequently have interesting online events with people who author books. Most think tanks have fellows, and we have fellows who produce books and films and news articles to get the public thinking about some of the things that impact all of us. And on December 14th online, and I'll send you the information, there's an event called the Ark of a Covenant, the US, Israel, and the Fate of Jewish People. And Walter Russell Mead has written this book, and we're going to talk about the US-Israel relationship. And I just think this is really timely. We're having hard conversations and seeing some really disturbing things in America about the ideas that some people have of what it means to be Jewish and the idea of what some folks believe about US-Israel relations. And I just think it could be interesting, especially to get younger voices in that conversation, because I know that some of these highly academic conversations are often dominated by older folks, but would love the energy, and we'd certainly love to see folks tune in.
For sure. I'll definitely link that down below and maybe show up on that day as well. Super awesome. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I definitely learned a lot, really enjoyed kind of getting the behind the scenes of think tanks, and maybe finding a career path for myself as well, which is super cool. But yeah, thank you so much again. And to everyone watching at home, thank you very much, and I will see you all next time.